The Israelites marched out of Egypt under a pillar of fire that turned the night into day. Moses led them, his staff raised high, his face lit by the unearthly glow. 600,000 men, plus women and children and livestock, moved as one river of people across the desert toward the sea. Pharaoh sat on his throne in the dark halls of Memphis. He had let them go, but regret boiled in his chest, faster than the morning sun could rise. He summoned his commanders. 600 of the finest chariots were harnessed. Horses stamped, bronze wheels turned. The army of Egypt thundered out of the city gates. The Israelites camped by the shore. The Red Sea stretched before them, endless and impossible, a wall of deep blue water from horizon to horizon. Families rested. Children slept. The pillar of fire stood guard behind them. A watchman on a dune froze. Dust rose on the horizon, low and fast, chariots. Hundreds of them. Panic spread through the camp like fire through dry grass. The people cried out to Moses. Had he brought them into the desert to die because there were not enough graves in Egypt? Moses raised his hand and silenced the crowd. The pillar of cloud shifted and moved behind them, descending between the Egyptian army and the Israelite camp. To one side, darkness so thick the charioteers could not see. To the other, light so brilliant the Israelites could count their own fingers. The cloud stood between them all night. At dawn, Moses walked to the edge of the sea. He lifted his staff over the water. The Lord sent a powerful east wind. It blew across the sea all night until the waters began to move. The sea divided. The water peeled apart like a scroll being unrolled. To the left, a wall of water rose 60 feet high. To the right, another wall, shimmering with fish and sea creatures frozen in place. And between them, a path. Dry ground, not mud, not sand. Dry earth, swept clean by the wind. The pillar of cloud rose. The Egyptians saw the path and charged. 600 chariots thundered down onto the sea floor. But the wheels began to sink. The dry ground became mud. Horses stumbled. Chariots swerved and jammed against each other. The soldiers cried out that the God of Israel was fighting against them. The Israelites walked through the sea on dry ground. A child held his mother's hand and looked up at the walls of water. An old woman touched the surface, and a fish swam past her fingers. A young shepherd carried his lamb on his shoulders. They walked through the heart of the sea. Moses stood on the far shore, while his people streamed past him. Every man, every woman, every child, every animal reached the other side. Not one was lost. Moses turned and looked back at the Egyptian army struggling in the middle of the sea. He stretched his hand over the water once more. The wind stopped. The walls stood for one breath, for one heartbeat. Then they crashed down. The sea returned with a roar that shook the earth. Chariots, horses, and soldiers vanished beneath the waves. Not one of them remained. The sun rose over the far shore. The sea was flat and calm, pink with dawn light. The Israelites stood on the sand and looked at the water that had been a wall and was now a grave. They looked at Moses. They looked at each other. And they believed. Miriam the prophetess took a timbrel in her hand. All the women followed her with timbrels and dancing. They sang. They sang to the Lord who had thrown horse and rider into the sea. The sound of their voices carried across the water and into the desert beyond. They had not left Egypt empty-handed. On that final night in Goshen, the mark of the Lamb protected every Hebrew door, and death passed over the houses of the Israelites while Egypt wept. At dawn, the Egyptians pressed silver and gold and clothing into their hands, desperate for them to leave. They carried the bones of Joseph in a wooden chest, a promise made 400 years before, now being kept. An elderly man steadied his wife as they walked between the towering walls of water. He had been a slave his entire life. He had never dreamed of a day like this. Tears ran down his weathered face and fell onto the dry sea floor. Then Moses lifted his voice on the shore. He sang to the Lord, for he had triumphed gloriously. The horse and its rider he had thrown into the sea. The men of Israel joined their voices to his. The sound of tens of thousands of freed people singing rose like thunder from the sand. And when the celebration quieted, the pillar of fire rose before them once more. It moved east into the wilderness. The people gathered their belongings, their children, their animals, and they followed. The sea lay still behind them,